From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano sandwiched between Kyle Goon and Jonas Shaffer. Today, we're going to be previewing the Ravens' Week 3 game against the Dallas Cowboys. And we have so much to discuss when it comes to this 0-2 Ravens team, just where they are mentally, physically, metaphorically, all that good stuff. But first, this show is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years, from developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior line of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota. Let's go places. Kyle, we've brought you in here because you've been spouting out some takes on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, but also because you and I are the two-thirds of this podcast, the only two-thirds of this podcast that know who Moo Dang is.
I don't know how to transition that to Ravens.
Is that a question, Paul?
Yes. I mean, the famous hippo. Jonas, how do you not know about this incredibly famous, adorable hippo that is going around on social media like wildfire?
Because I'm too busy crunching film of Daniel Faalele, obviously.
Like Moodang's reactions to water, the Ravens are a little chaotic right now.
Sure, exactly. Well, Kai, we also brought you in here because we got to talk about a Baltimore sports team who is underperforming, that has an offense that is inconsistent, that is causing a lot of angst here in the city of Baltimore. And we're not talking about the Baltimore Orioles. We're talking about the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, and the other day I was out at the Orioles park and talking to people who had been to the Sunday Ravens game, and they were just describing sort of the crushing feeling of watching the Orioles blow another fourth quarter lead, which has happened an unfortunate amount of times. I believe 11 times in the John Harbaugh era at the very least, and a lot of those have come during the Lamar Jackson era. As great as it's been, the Ravens just seem to have trouble holding on to these fourth quarter leads, even double-digit leads like they had in the fourth quarter against the Raiders, and it is bringing people down. And I think we can all agree, being to Owings Mills a couple times this week, it's not the greatest vibe there either.
It's not great at Oriole Park Camden Yards. It's not great at One Winning Drive. It's not great at M&T Bank Stadium. We're just sitting in the midst of the factory of sadness. Very fallow time right now for these sports teams. It's been especially painful. But you also did write, you do every week a reality check where you kind of scan the pundits, scan the headlines, and determine what's a good take and what's a bad take. And 99% of the time, they're bad takes out there. But we've seen a lot of chatter on social media about John Harbaugh. And for just so many reasons, he is not on the hot seat.
No, I mean, I think there's just a lot of recency bias to an 0-2 start. I think, over when you've been coach as long as John Harbaugh has, I mean, it's sort of like you either get fired a hero or live long enough to be the villain as the coach of the town football team. That's kind of happening here. I mean, and you look at his winning percentage over his tenure, you get guys like Andy Reid, you get Mike McCarthy, you get Sean Payton, guys who generally have been vilified. Mike Tomlin, who last won a Super Bowl way back in 2000 without with 2 zeros in it. So it's just general discontent, I think. And of course, when you lose, there's going to be discontent. And when you've been around a long time, there's going to be discontent and people stirring. And I think Mike McDonald getting hired and having that beautiful 2-0 undefeated record in a seriously small sample size. There were people who were calling for Mike McDonald to be the head coach of the Ravens even last year, even before the Ravens got bounced out of the AFC Championship. But I think that's just general fan discontent for a coach who's been doing it a long time and frankly has had a lot of success.
Yeah, I mean, I think people look at John Harbaugh and they compare him naturally to other people, other coaches around the NFL, and they wonder what it is that he does, because he's not the offensive play caller like a Shanahan is in San Francisco. He's not a defensive coordinator, even though I think he has been the architect of what's been like perpetually one of the NFL's best defenses over the past decade. He's obviously very hands-on with special teams, and even now that's an issue. You would think that he would be better at time management, but we have seen that become a crisis over the last two games with some of his challenges, with some of his timeout usage. So there is this pervasive sense of excuse me, like what is it, John, that you actually do,
Right.
ignoring all the work that he does in the facility, in building the culture, in hiring coaches, developing coaches, evaluating draft prospects. So I think it's obviously pretty silly to say that no matter what happens this year, barring him being involved in like a federal crime, he's going to get he's going to get fired.
Why would you even speak that into existence?
What I will say is that 2025 is the last year of his contract. Typically, you don't want coaches to go in
lame duck
as a lame duck coach. So if this season goes catastrophically, and if Steve Bisciotti is like, you know what, John, I usually don't do this, but last year went so poorly, and I'm not really in love with the direction of this franchise, I'm going to make you dangle in the wind a little bit. I think that would be interesting, even though I also think would be pretty unlikely, just given their relationship and considering everything John Harbaugh has meant to this franchise over the past decade plus.
Yeah, I mean, he is a CEO head coach, and the Ravens are an organization that prides itself on stability. I mean, look at an organization like the Carolina Panthers that took the #1 overall draft pick and absolutely bungled him because of terrible coaching, because of consistent coaching changes, because of bad personnel. EDC and John Harbaugh are about as safe as any two executive head coaching pairings in the NFL, because John Harbaugh's quotes are all over one winning drive and M&T Bank Stadium. Like, he is foundational for this organization right now. They're not going to move off of him because of an 0-2 start. They're not going to move off of him if this season somehow turns into a disaster. I mean, it would take several years of prolonged, fallow periods for this team to really consider moving off of John Harbaugh.
And you're also hitting on something that is really important, which is, I mean, the Lamar Jackson era. Are you going to change coaches in the middle of the Lamar Jackson era, especially with the success that both of those guys have had? And listen, I mean, I know everyone is not happy with how the first two games have gone. You shouldn't be. You absolutely shouldn't be, especially this last game when the Ravens, by all rights, should have won that.
Yep.
But I tend to think of those as the exclusions to the rule, which is those two have been a winning pair. And to your point about Bryce Young, even though Lamar is much more developed, I just don't see them abandoning the John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson experiment when it's yielded such good results. I mean, the only better era of Ravens football was the John Harbaugh, Joe Flacco era.
Right. And you also have to give John Harbaugh credit for finding somebody like Mike McDonald, who came from, yes, he had NFL experience, but was just the defensive coordinator at Michigan and came to the NFL. And within 2 years, he was the hottest coaching candidate on the market.
And how many Mike McDonalds have there been under John Harbaugh?
Several.
I mean, there have been a lot of guys who have gone on to get hired as head coaches under John Harbaugh. And I think, we just tend to look at the stuff in a vacuum. I mean, Chuck Pagano, Rex Ryan, just guys who have gone up and risen, and it just I don't see it, and I think the kicking and screaming is a little bit short-sighted.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the actual issues facing this 2024 team, Kyle, because they are myriad. Let's start with the offensive line, because that is definitely the most pressing. It is one that has shown itself. We thought coming into the season it was going to be the biggest issue, and it has shown itself to be that biggest issue. John Harbaugh got a lot of questions earlier this week about Daniel Faalele's spot at right guard. He is a converted tackle. He's playing at the guard spot for the first time in his career, and he is having significant issues. Jonas wrote about it on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Did a phenomenal film breakdown of what is going wrong with Daniel Faalele right now. And there's been a lot of questions coming John Harbaugh's way about, would Ben Cleveland have been a better option? And John Harbaugh said emphatically that Daniel Faalele was better in training camp and in preseason than Ben Cleveland. Ben Cleveland didn't get really any reps in the preseason at right guard. He was used as a center When Tyler Linderbaum was out, he was used a little bit at left guard. He was not used at right guard. Where do you think this offensive line is right now? Do you think, even though John Harbaugh is not feeling any pressure of being on the hot seat, do you think he feels any pressure to make personnel changes, starting with maybe subbing Ben Cleveland in for Daniel Faalele?
I mean, he should. I mean, yes. The answer is yes. He absolutely has to feel pressure. I just wonder if, because really the issue here is, has Ben Cleveland done enough in John Harbaugh's eyes to change the perception of the player he is? And it's tough. I think Jonas had a really good breakdown, and I appreciated seeing his evaluation of how Ben played, especially in those last couple games of the regular season. But I just don't think the Ravens feel that Ben, who's a very big, imposing guy. If there's a Raven who looks like a grizzly bear, it's Ben Cleveland. But I don't think that
imposing looks like Mudang. Deontay
Hardy, Patrick Ricard. No, I just don't think that the imposing figure matches the toughness that the Ravens want to see out of him and the pure physicality. And that's been an issue that I think we've seen in games as well. I mean, maybe not in some of the games that people are pointing to as the reason why he should replace Daniel Faalele. But, I think Ben does have some ground to cover, and it's twofold, right? I mean, he hasn't gotten those opportunities at right guard, which, may not be a fair fight in that case. But I just think, people probably are giving Ben Cleveland a little bit too much credit, because when a guy is failing in the starting lineup, the most popular guy is number 2 on the depth chart.
Right. Jonas, you broke down the film. What stood out the most?
I think the thing that's probably most disappointing, if you're a Ravens fan, is you have Tyler Linderbaum, who came to the NFL as like the highest graded zone blocking run prospect, either at center or along the offensive line, in like the 8 years at that point that PFF had done college football charting in. And over 2 games, they've run like 11 total zone run plays. It's not like they're majoring in one thing. They've run power, they've run tosses, they've run counters and everything. But it's like you have this guy, it's like it's the Maserati in the shabby,
the bag garage.
In the bag garage. Like, what are you doing if not finding a way to make the best use of Tyler Linderbaum's talents? And you look at the ESPN run block win rate. Tyler Linderbaum's turned into a great pass blocker, but he's not all the way there as a run blocker, because I think they're asking him to do stuff that he's not great at. Like Andrew Voorhees, again, maybe this was just a vestige of when he was fully healthy at USC, but he was a lot better as a zone blocker than he was in these gap and power schemes that the Ravens keep on running. So it's just like you have so many round pegs or square pegs, and you're trying to force everything for the sake of this one player who is not that.
Right.
And it's just the point. And obviously the counter to that is that Ben Cleveland, a little bit more athletic, I think, than Faalele in terms of like a linear athlete, but he's not going to be the kind of, easy fit for maybe what the Ravens should be doing. So, but at least try it.
They're both hulking guys.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like, and I know the grades bear out differently for each guy, but we're talking about, even though Daniel Faalele is the biggest man many of us have ever seen, we're talking about somewhat similarly built players. And that, honestly, that might be more of a personnel issue. That might be more of an Eric DeCosta question of, why these guards, these 2 candidates for your right guard are kind of somewhat similarly built players who don't really seem to match the other guys who are sort of the foundational pieces of your line going forward for the next few years.
I'm going to write about this, I think, later today, but my suggestion for John Harbaugh as an olive branch, did you guys watch any of the Bills-Dolphins game in week 2, Thursday night game?
Yes.
So the big run from the Bills, the 50-yard run for James Cook?
Yes, I think so.
That was with 6 offensive linemen on the field. I feel like if there was ever a game on the Ravens schedule where you could do that kind of exotic stuff, where you get a 6th lineman onto the field, not have it be an indictment of Daniel Faalele, have it be an actual strategic benefit, is this one, because you're going against this Cowboys team that had 3 of the 4 worst, run defense grades in the NFL. One of those guys was so bad that they just put him on IR with a fake wrist injury. They just signed someone off the Commanders practice squad who wasn't good enough to make the Rams 53-man roster. This is a situation where you want to get as smash mouth as possible with the run game. So why not put Ben Cleveland out there situationally as a 6th offensive lineman? You can have a chance to evaluate him. Obviously, that raises maybe that's going to increase your chances that you were wrong anyway with Daniel Faalele. But if you're going to reach that point anyway, why not accelerate your evaluation of them in games? I just think that would be a smart way to not only help your team, but also just get a look at this guy who maybe you're starting to have some second doubts about. Could he actually be better than this guy who I didn't think he was better than in the first place?
Right. I think the frustrating thing for me is that the Ravens came into this season knowing that one of those 2 guys, Ben Cleveland or maybe Josh Jones, could sneak his way into there, or Daniel Faalele would get one of those guard spots. And those are guys, we're not talking about Roger Rosengarten, who's a 2nd-round rookie who's on this rotation with Patrick McCary. Ben Cleveland's in his 4th NFL season, and Daniel Faalele's in his 3rd NFL season, and they look significantly worse than, I would say probably worse than Andrew Voorhees at left guard. They look, who is essentially in his 1st season. So they could have brought back Kevin Zeitler. They could have tried to do something. They could have signed somebody for depth. We talked all training camp about maybe they should just bring in a body there to give them some competition and to have some veteran experience so that if somebody goes down, or to push these guys, they didn't do any of that. And so we're not talking about a rookie here. We're talking about a 3rd-year player and a 4th-year player who are massively struggling. And frankly, it scares me to think that if Ben Cleveland was that much worse than Daniel Faalele in training camp, that the floor is so low at that position right now that unless they bring in somebody else, that's going to be a problem area for them all season.
Yeah. And I mean, they're going to have to figure it out. And I agree with Jonas that this is the week to do it because the Cowboys have been so weak in defending the run. And the Ravens just need a game where it's like, hey, even if what we want to do, screw it. We're pushing you guys over. We're flattening your defense,
right? Because
we're so good in the run game. We are imposing our will, and that's just who the Ravens have been for 5 years.
Yeah,
and I that was what was so confusing to me about this last game, where in the 4th quarter they can't get anything going. And I mean, obviously we know Max Crosby was a huge part of that, but I mean, I just haven't figured out why it's such an issue in the play calling of, hey, they had that first opening drive against Kansas City. There's some Lamar Jackson designed runs. There's Derrick Henry plowing ahead, and his efficacy, maybe you could argue, but to me, that matchup of the, hey, we're physically running over you, or Lamar Jackson is shooting around behind us and you have no idea where he's going to go, that should be foundational and enough for an offense to just build off that. And I think another issue is the Ravens just haven't called plays that convincingly in a sequence that defenses are guessing. You either know, hey, Derrick Henry's in the game. All right, they're going to plunge ahead. It's going to be something in the middle, and those guards are going to be a weakness, and we're going to exploit it. Or Justice Hill is in the game. Oh, well, it's going to be a passing down, or Lamar is going to scramble. And it's just that mixture failing to materialize, I think, isn't helping these guys who are already clearly overwhelmed.
Yeah, and these problems also, real quickly, Jonas, compound themselves because the bad offensive line doesn't just nullify the benefit of having Derrick Henry because they're not opening lanes. It also nullifies his benefit because Justice Hill is the better pass blocker. So he's in on obvious passing downs. So when Max Crosby stunts Daniel Faalele and sacks Lamar Jackson on that second to last offensive possession, you have to put Justice Hill in there. You can't even put Derrick Henry in the game because now it's an obvious passing down and Justice Hill is a better pass blocker and better pass catcher. So your offensive line is in multiple ways nullifying your biggest free agent addition.
To me, this kind of goes hand in hand in a way with the larger discussion, the larger discussions of offensive identity, which is something that is a bit of a sore spot with me because aren't we talking about just having all these definitions of players doing certain jobs, isn't that in itself a sign of identity? Like, you know, you know that Justice Hill is going to be the better third down back, or you know that Derrick Henry on certain situations is going to be in there. I just feel like everyone wringing their hands about what is the Ravens' offensive identity, completely overlooking the fact that last year, you look at Week 14, Lamar goes for 316 yards against that Rams secondary. A week later, he can't be an effective passer, so they just run wild against Jacksonville. It's like, are we forget? Yeah, you have to be multiple. And as John Harbaugh said, he was asked several questions about identity yesterday. It's like, well, if you have an identity and you stick to it, then you're not going to be a very good offense because teams are just going to try to stop the run if all you want to do on first down is run. It's just like, I am not there yet with what is the Ravens' offensive identity when, one, we just were 2 weeks into the season, and you have to be able to be flexible. I just don't get all this.
No, I actually disagree with you because in the fourth quarter with a 10-point lead or a 7-point lead after the Raiders scored a field goal, we know what the Ravens need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Why weren't they that? Why weren't they the 5 or 6 straight years of top 5 rushing offense? Why couldn't they sustain that? Why couldn't they find ways? And to me, the rushing is foundational to what they do, and what Lamar does on top of that is somewhat based on, okay, what's the threat of defense's fear of his ability to tuck in and run? And so I actually disagree, and I do think they've lost sight of, hey, like, we are a physical football team that can run whenever the hell we want.
Right.
And they lost sight of that on Sunday, and I think that's a problem.
I just think that, like, there's a distinction in my mind between, like, identity as it pertains to play calling and, like, actual efficacy.
Right.
On that second or third to last drive, the first play of that game after the Raiders had scored the 25-yard field goal to make it 23-16, it's a 5-yard carry for Derrick Henry, and then Lamar has that option keeper where he would have like 3 or 4 yards, but Mark Andrews just doesn't block his guy for whatever reason. And then you get the neutral zone infraction, and then you have the weird false start on Derrick Henry when obviously that kind of plays into the identity question of why you were having Charlie Kohler be your tush push guy instead of Derrick Henry. But still, that would have been 3 runs in a row to try to bleed that clock away. And so,
but they couldn't do it.
Yeah, I know, but it's like, then what is the point of? Are we talking about identity as like they are not effective at this thing they should be, or that they are ignoring it altogether in situations where they shouldn't have?
I think it's a matter of semantics, and I'm guilty of this because I literally titled one of the podcast episodes where the Ravens need to find their identity.
Yeah,
I think it's less about maybe using the term identity, but you watch the Kansas City Chiefs and they get into critical situations, and the ball is going to Travis Kelce, and that's a Hall of Fame quarterback throwing to a Hall of Fame tight end. It's just an easy button to get out of it. You watch the Eagles, they get in a similar situation. The ball is going to AJ Brown. It is these top flight weapons getting the ball and at critical times in the game. And the Ravens haven't been able to do that.
I mean, the Raiders did that with Devontae Adams as well.
Right, exactly. And what did we see in the AFC Championship game last year when it got into critical situations? Where was the easy button? Where was we all know it's coming, but we're still going to do it, and we're still going to do it successfully in your face. The Ravens didn't have that play last year.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but if it's one player who keeps on messing up from getting you to realizing your identity, then is it an identity crisis, or is it just you don't have enough good players because you were paying your quarterback over $50 million a year?
It's all of the above. But we have to transition to this Cowboys preview because I mean, we could spend all day on this, but I think we all agree on that there is an issue, and we all agree what the issue is. It's just what it's called, It's just whether
I bet the Germans have a word for this.
They probably Schadenfreude.
Verklempt.
All right. Ravens and Cowboys Sunday at 4:25 on Fox. Ravens are 1.5-point favorites. We're talking about a Cowboys team that has had 2 blowouts so far this season. One in their favor, one not so. They blew out the Browns in week 1. They got blown out by the Saints in week 2. This is Lamar Jackson's first trip, Jonas, to Jerry World. You had this note since he was drafted there. That's wild.
Yeah, he was surprised too.
And we're talking about a Ravens team that had some surprise names added to the injury list on Wednesday's injury report. Kyle Hamilton and Ronnie Stanley being the biggest names there.
Yeah, Ronnie's expected to be available on Sunday, according to John Harbaugh. Did not get a good look at Kyle Hamilton. Didn't see him in the locker room yesterday. He's a guy who I think is going to try to play through everything. It looked like he was dealing with something upper body related. I thought it was a shoulder late in that game against the Raiders. Obviously, you never want to see anyone show up with a back injury, but we'll see. I mean, I feel like he's probably more likely than not to play, but that's just based on the fact that he was able to finish that game against the Raiders and play, I think, literally 100% of the snaps.
And when we talk about this Cowboys offense, you're starting with Dak Prescott, who just got paid. Certainly better than Gardner Minshew at just about everything. Remember, he was going for the MVP last year until really that Dolphins game, I think it was, that he started to struggle and then kind of fell out of the conversation.
He struggled against the Eagles, too.
Yes. Yeah, right near the end of the season. CeeDee Lamb, another guy who just got paid. He missed practice Wednesday with an ankle injury. How the heck is this Ravens defense that has allowed a crazy amount of passing yards so far this season, dead last in passing yards per game allowed through the first 2 weeks of the season, going to stop Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb if they're both on the field?
Well, I think it helps that there's not a proven number 2 or number 3 the way that the Raiders did. Obviously, Dak Prescott, like you said, is going to make things easier, but it's going to be interesting because at CeeDee Lamb, he can line up inside, which would give the Ravens trouble if they don't have Kyle Hamilton, but he can also line up outside and beat you on those 9 balls, which obviously Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey just could not stop. Credit to Devontae Adams, credit to Gardner Minshew for putting those passes just right on the button. Obviously, Dak Prescott has not had a great start to the season. I think he threw 2 picks against the Saints in that week 2 loss, but still, CeeDee Lamb had over 1,700 yards last season. As you said, Dak Prescott, one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL. Not a whole lot else for this Cowboys offense, but again, the Raiders didn't have a whole lot else besides just throw it to Brock Bowers, throw it to Devontae Adams, maybe throw it to Jacoby Myers, and that was enough to beat the Ravens on Sunday.
It's also a confounding defense right now for the Ravens because 2 games is a horrendously small sample size, but the Ravens are dead last in pass yards per game allowed, and they are alive first in rushing yards per game allowed. Is that a term? Can we say dead last and alive first?
Nope.
No.
Okay. They're great at stopping the run right now. They are not so great at stopping the pass. For a team that, I thought they would be, they were great at both last year. I thought they would be great at stopping the run and the pass this year. They were without Nate Wiggins last week. He was in the car accident early last week. He was still out of practice with the neck/concussion. But frankly, a first-round rookie shouldn't be the difference in a good pass defense and a bad pass defense. But Kyle, what did you make of especially the way that pass defense played and the secondary played in the fourth quarter against the Raiders? How are you feeling about this defense right now?
I mean, Jonas probably watched a lot more tape than I did. I felt like
Jonas has watched more tape than anybody.
I think it was a little hard to separate the reaction to the 115 penalty yards that the Ravens had, and I think there was a little bit of resignation at the end there. That
I think talking about the Orioles.
Gosh, but I just think that they fought for a good long hard time, and then but they fought for 3 quarters, and I think there's also a few communication things still kind of bugging this defense that I've heard that Zach Orr has told guys, I got to call plays a little faster, get you guys in a little sooner. I don't know if that was just something that he said or if is a real thing that needs fixing. But, it's just a veteran group. I thought this was going to be one of the best secondaries in NFL purely on talent. Yep. And they haven't really been that. They've had very good stretches. I mean, I think the first half was a really good half for them. But it's just, I felt like there was a little bit of surrender in the fourth quarter, and that was a big part of it.
On the other side of the ball, this leads to my word of the day, guys. Jonas, we waited until 30 minutes into the podcast, but I'm getting my word of the day in there. You know what my word is?
It's not alive first, is it?
No, it's Parson. It is Parson, which Dictionary.com defines as a member of the clergy, especially a Protestant minister, a pastor, a rector. Comes from 1200 to 1250 Middle English persone. Comes from the Latin persona, parish priest, Latin personage. We're talking about Micah Parsons. We're not talking about a
I was like, where is this going?
Yeah, we're talking about Micah Parsons, multiple Parsons. I would think that perhaps maybe far back in his lineage, he had some Parsons that were important members of the church.
I think
it is criminal for you to own a dictionary. Is what I'm learning.
I think we all would have been better off if your word of the day was just Micah, which is a rock.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow. My minerals, Marie. All right. This Ravens offense, I should say, going up against this Cowboys pass rush scares the crap out of me. Micah Parsons is a one-man wrecking crew, and the way that Max Crosby absolutely wrecked the game for the Ravens from the first quarter on, in a way that, as Kyle put in his column, looked like somebody goofed on the scouting report, makes me think that Micah Parsons could very much have a similar effect. Why would I be wrong about that? What reason is there for me to hope that the Ravens will have a better answer against Micah Parsons than they did against Max Crosby? Is there any?
I probably just, if they can get into a situation where they're one, ahead, and two, just running the ball well against the Cowboys, and that's going to take some sting out of the Cowboys pass rush. If you're facing 2nd and 4, 3rd and 2, you really can't pin your ears back, as much as Max Crosby did on Sunday. And also just Micah Parsons comes off the field, which is something that Max Crosby doesn't do. So I think obviously Micah Parsons in a vacuum is probably scarier than Max Crosby, especially because you feel good about him just like lining up over the center or the guard, either guard spot, and just basically trying to beat them one-on-one like he's Allen freaking Iverson. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of can the Ravens establish the run? And if they can, then Parsons is going to be pretty quiet. He didn't really have that great of a game against the Saints because they were down from basically that entire first quarter. What they allowed touchdowns, I think on the first 6 or 7 possessions from New Orleans, and just didn't really have a chance to be Micah Parsons, the scary guy we all know from the NFL.
Yeah, and I think Micah in general is a little easier to scheme against in the run game. Max is sort of a run pass, I'm still going to wreck your world type guy. And I don't think Micah Parsons is that same type of guy. And to kind of build on what Jonas is saying there, I mean, the scripted drives from the Ravens, I think I've been largely impressed by, and you saw them come out of the halftime against the Raiders and put together a couple good drives. It's just what happens after that. But I think in this game, if they are able to gain some points out of the scripted drives, start each half with scoring drives, that'll help them a lot. And just not get behind schedule. Like Jonas said, it's like it allows you to pin your ears back if you're a defense.
So who's most scared of whom? The Ravens of Micah Parsons or the Cowboys of the Ravens running game?
I think the Cowboys should be scared of the Ravens running game because the weapons are there. It's just, I think what's frustrating to everybody is that the Ravens have sort of underachieved with the talent they've had. And I think this game will be the end of that.
Derrick Henry cannot have 5 first half yards, rushing yards in this game on 7 carries. The Ravens have to continue to feed the beast. He should have 18 carries again or more, I think. And I
think 29.
I think 30 carries.
Not 30, 29 exactly.
Yeah. So long as the offensive line isn't randomly inconsistent in front of him, which you pointed out, Kyle, is those are John Harbaugh's
words. Very
words.
Consistently inconsistent.
Yeah, a little bit of redundancy there.
You can always expect when the offensive line is inconsistent.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, let's get to our predictions. Jonas, why don't you start us off? Who do you have winning this game?
I just think this is a CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons takeover game situation. I also wonder a little bit if this is going to be a Mike Zimmer special where he just finds ways to flush the Ravens with the blitz. Obviously, last week was kind of a difficult one for him, but he has his career reputation as being a guy who can be more exotic than the Dan Quinn defenses were in recent Cowboys vintage. I think this is just going to be another really close one. And, I just wonder if certain players will try to do more than what they're capable of and have that kind of cost them, considering just how much the Ravens feel like their back's against the wall. So I'm going to go with Cowboys 24, Ravens 23, and we get the first 0-3 start since 2015.
I have a similar score, but I have the Ravens on the other side of this. I have 27-24. I'm trying not to be a prisoner of the moment here. I think it's easy to predict a loss after a loss, a win after a win, etc., because it's what's freshest in your mind right now. And I do think this offensive line is going to have so much trouble that I think John Harbaugh might make a change in the middle of this game. I think he might bench Daniel Faalele if he gets off to a cold start, and he might put Ben Cleveland in there because that's what Harbaugh left the door open for when he was talking about Ben Cleveland. He said, quote, if I see that Ben is playing better than Daniel, then Ben will be the starting right guard, and he practices every day. So I think it's a possibility. He left the door open there, and I have the Ravens. They're just too talented a team. I know that's an easy cop out because they're already 0-2, but they're too talented a team to be 0-3. And then you're talking about a tough road ahead against the Bills and the Bengals. So I've got the Ravens coming out with a win here, 27-24. And I will note that I have correctly predicted the Ravens score, not the opponent. But through the first 2 weeks, I predicted correctly the entire score, 27-20, with the Chiefs beating the Ravens. And then last week, I did predict that the Ravens would have 23 points. But I also had the Raiders scoring 17 and not the 26 that they did. So let's see if I'm correct here again.
Yeah, I'm going to go Ravens, think 30-20. And
32-20 or 32?
Ravens 30, Cowboys 20.
30. Ravens 30, Cowboys 20.
Let's go for some scoregami, baby.
late game safety.
Sorry. I just think that desperation should be a currency for the Ravens this week. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I think this game is a must-win more for the Ravens than the Cowboys. On paper, their strength should be running the ball. I think the paper will win out in this, even though we haven't seen it to the degree that we all think it should be. I think I think this week will be the get back to basics, get back to strength week. I would suspect Lamar running the ball a little more than he did last week. I think just 5 carries. I think that's the formula for them. I think it's some Derrick Henry, some Lamar, some play action, and I just think that strength is a little bit too strong, and I think the defense as well with their depending on Kyle Hamilton's availability, I think the defense as well with their projected strengths should actually match up fairly well, and maybe learn some things from Devontae Adams last week. So I know it wasn't what we saw last week, but I think this is the more get back game for the Ravens. And when you look at how the matchups appear, I think it will be closer to the paper matchups this week than it was last week.
Paul, can I ask quickly my silly question about the Jerry World video board?
You may.
What would you guys want to play on the 140 foot by 90 foot, 160 feet wide, 70 foot tall jumbotron at Jerry World? What would you want played?
Moo Dang highlights. There you go.
I would say
Easy.
when I was the lead in my high school play,
Oh, there we go.
No one wants to see that.
in front of a stadium full of 70,000 roaring fans.
I take it back. I would like when I was the lead in my high school play to when Paul was back to back, and then everyone votes by mobile.
It was better. Wow.
In middle school,
We know it's a route.
on my club soccer team, we were playing a game in the rain, and a ball popped up to me at the edge of the 18-yard line, 18-yard box. I headed it to myself, and something came over me. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit, and I completed a bicycle kick, and I scored.
Wow.
I scored on a bicycle kick.
Is there footage
What
of
are
it?
the physics of your body turning upside down? I'm not sure.
This is
Yeah.
middle school, Jonas. So I was more aerodynamic back then. So that I think just like a replay of that for all my biggest fans, that would be incredible.
Is there footage of this?
No.
I'd imagine it'd be like a redheaded Kareem Abdul-Jabbar doing like a
Yeah.
bicycle kick.
My runner up or my honorable mention would be when Paul's mom sees me as an acceptable podcast partner.
That's
never
that
gonna
day is
happen.
never going to happen. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. Look, she's a big fan of the show in general.
We need to leave.
In spite of me.
in spite of Jonas. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. And Kyle is at Kyle Goon. Also follow at All Banner Sports. And of course, I've said it like 5 times throughout the podcast, but subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, $1 for 6 months to read all of Kyle's great work, Jonas's great work, Gianna Hahn's great work. We have so much more exciting stuff coming for you over the coming days as we get ready for the Ravens Week 3 game against the Dallas Cowboys. And of course, like, rate, review, subscribe. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts of this show, and I will read it out here on the show. That is a Paul promise on the Banner Ravens podcast.
And one reviewer might get a Toyota car.
Might get the super
could
reliable
happen.
Or 5 minutes with
Toyota.
Lou
Never
Dang.
know. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer and Kyle Goon, I'm Paul Mancano.